Hi guys, Ricky Pope here, and this week on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast, I'm joined by Dylan Novak, and we hear about how he shares the gospel with some very famous people, plus scripture and nerdy news, and we'll get to all of that right after this. With this being Thanksgiving week in the U.S., I want to take a moment and thank God for each of you that listen. I can't believe I've been doing this show for 3 years, and this is the first episode of season 4. I would love to hear your feedback over the past 3 years, whether you are joining us for the first time or whether you've been listening ever since the beginning. I would love to hear what you like, what you dislike about the show, and what you would like to see in the future. You can message me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or send an email to ricky@christiannerdsunite.com. I can't wait to see what this next year of the Christian Nerds Unite podcast brings. We are part of the Christian Nerd HQ podcast network, and we have a new show that just launched, and it comes out every Thursday. It's called The Bible Nerd Show. Here's a quick word from David about the new show.
Hey nerds, this is David. You know me best from Tatooine Sons, but I want to introduce to you a new show coming to the Christian Nerd HQ. It's called The Bible Nerd Show. This is where a preacher, a teacher, and an average Joe all come together on a weekly basis to look at the blockbuster television series called The Chosen. Each week, we take a deeper look into it episode by episode as we uncover some of the best moments within the show, some of the biblical stories within it, and identify whether or not we agree with the choices that they made biblically. And we look at the historic, geographic, religious, and cultural context of each episode. It is a lot of fun. We can't wait for you to check it out. It comes out every Thursdays here on the Christian Nerd HQ. Make sure you check out the Bible Nerd Show.
Make sure you check out the Bible Nerd Show and all the other great podcasts at christiannerdhq.com. Now let's read some scripture. Mark 16:15-16. He said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned." And 2 Timothy 4:1-2. In the presence of God and of Jesus Christ, who will judge the living and the dead, and in view of his appearing and his kingdom, I give you this charge. Preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. It's clear in these scriptures that we've been given direction to share the gospel. Some will share it with many people around the world, and others will share it with just a few close friends. Some feel a calling to reach specific people groups, much like the international teams that I work with on a daily basis that share the gospel in hard-to-reach areas. And others, like our guest today, feel a calling to reach out and to share with specific individuals. No matter where you are on this spectrum, I pray that you'll take a moment this week to pray and ask God to show you who He wants you to share with this week. Now for some nerdy news. The Hunger Games, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, takes the box office this weekend with a $44 million domestic opening and $100 million worldwide, considerably lower than previous installments of the franchise. But with a $100 million budget, it is expected to do well overall. Another new film, Trolls Band Together, an animated movie from Universal, comes in second, opening with $30 million domestically. while Marvel Studios' The Marvels comes in third on its second week at the box office, way off pace for getting anywhere close to its estimated $300 million budget. The new horror thriller, Thanksgiving, that started as a fake trailer and later became a feature film, comes in fourth, and Five Nights at Freddy's continues to stay in the top five. The SAG-AFTRA actors strike that began in July has a tentative agreement with studios. The leadership has agreed to the new contract and said that actors can resume work, but the union members have just begun voting and will be voting through early December. Most expect that this vote will pass. As we have already speculated here on the show, it's been announced that the television series Young Sheldon will come to an end with season 7. Because of the recent actor and writer strike, the season will return in February with a short 14-episode season. A 1-hour season finale has been scheduled for May 16th, 2024. It appears that Pedro Pascal is in talks to play Reed Richards in the future Fantastic Four film. I love Pascal and all of his previous work, but personally, I'm not sure I buy into him as Reed Richards. Scheduling appears to be the big issue if this is to work. We will have to wait and see. In our interview today, I chat with Dylan Novak, who goes by the handle Celebrity Evangelist online. Dylan and I discuss how he got started sharing the gospel with musicians and actors and why he does it. Now let's get right into our interview. Dylan Novak, it is so great to have you on the Christian Nerds Unite podcast today.
Hey, great to be here.
So Dylan, you have been you're known as the kind of the evangelist to the stars of sorts. Tell us a little bit for those who may not be familiar with you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what your big ministry is.
Yeah, so and I like how you worded that, evangelist to the stars, because the ministry page is called Celebrity Evangelist. And I get people sometimes, so you're calling yourself a celebrity? No. That's just the handle that I chose 8 years ago, and it's too late to change it now, which, it brings up conversation. But yeah, so it's very appropriate me being on this podcast. I am a huge superhero pop culture nerd.
Awesome.
And when I was 13, there was a Comic-Con coming around, and a lot of actors and actresses were going to be there. And I begged my family to take me. They took me. And one of the people I got to meet was Margot Kidder, who played Lois Lane in the Superman movies.
Oh.
Came across an interview of her talking to Oprah about a movie she had done called The Tribulation with Gary Busey. And Oprah asked her what that movie meant to her because, and I thought that's a very fair question. And Margot made the comment that it was just a paycheck, meant absolutely nothing to her because she's an atheist. She doesn't believe in any of that. And it hit me like a ton of bricks because that's when reality hit me that Margot's a soul, just like you, just like me, who's on her way to heaven or hell. And quite obviously from that statement, she was lost. She didn't know Jesus as her Lord and Savior. And so I prayed that night, God, please send somebody to tell Margot about Jesus before it's eternally too late. And God really convicted my heart. What about you? You're going to be there. You've got the truth. You go for it. So after playing Jonah for a few days, I finally gave in because it's never good to wrestle or run from God. And we went to the event, and I just gave generic tracts from my church to everybody, not those scary chick tracts from the 90s, like actual genuine. Here, this is just an example. Who is Jesus? Just stuff like that has the gospel in it. And so everybody was receptive, including Miss Kidder. So from age 13 to 20, that's kind of what I did. I went to events where celebrities were going to be that I was a fan of. I would loosely research what they believed just so I could kind of be mentally prepared. Okay, I'm giving this person a tract. I kind of, they're a Mormon, they're Jehovah's Witness, they're atheists. I kind of know where they're coming from. Yeah. Well, the key thing I just said, though, was I was going where I wanted to go. I was being very selfish. In 2015, an opportunity arose for me to go after and chase James Taylor. And I had a very good opportunity window to try to reach him, because I slowly moved from just doing like Comic Cons to backstage doors to, so on and so forth. Basically making my own meet and greet in the street, if you want. And a friend of mine said, "Are you going to go after James?" And I said, no, probably not. And he said, "Why not?" I knew in my heart why not. I wasn't a fan at the time. I am now. I appreciate his music now. But at the time, I was just like, Fire and Rain's a decent song. But he said, "Well, I think you should research what he believes at least." And I was like, okay. And as I remember, as I was Googling, I'm like, please be a Christian, please be a Christian, please be a Christian. And came across a Rolling Stone interview from 1991 where they said, "You mention Jesus a lot in your songs. Are you a pretty devout Christian?" And he said, "It's almost the exact opposite. I'm an atheist." Or he said, "I'm agnostic. My parents were both atheists. And I was never raised with any faith or any belief, but I would be open to listen if somebody would take the time to show me." That's, beyond open door. And so I was like, oh man, how can I not go try to share the gospel with this guy? And I remember telling my mom, I said, "I wish I could say this, this, and this to him." And she said, "Well, why don't you just write him a letter?" Because especially it doesn't matter where you're meeting somebody, anybody listening that's gone to a Comic Con even knows this. You could have a conversation with somebody for half an hour. You could have a conversation with somebody for 30 seconds or 5 seconds. You never know. And especially in the street, because like I said, that's not a scheduled meet and greet by any means.
Right.
So they may not even want to stop for you. So I thought that's a really good idea. So wrote a letter saying everything I wanted to say, but might not have the time, and got some other material together. And it actually took 3 days. I was not expecting it to do that. But finally, when I was able to get to James, he gave me about half an hour of his time. He was very gracious. He actually was on his bus. He wasn't at the hotel I thought he was at, but he saw me waiting outside and came off the bus to say, "Hey, do you want an autograph?" Which I just want to point out that does not happen. James is just another kind of sweetheart. He's a good man. And so I showed him the gift. I explained to him why I came. He listened to everything I had to say. And he said, "That interview you're talking about was almost 25 years ago. You're the first person that's tried to explain anything to me." And from that moment on, everything changed, because I went from pursuing my selfish desires. I wanted to be a Christian drummer. That was my dream. But God said, "No, I want you to be an evangelist. I want you to share the gospel full time." So that night I told God, "I'll do whatever it is you want me to do." And just slowly over a couple months, everything just fell into place where things started lining up for me to have a platform to reach certain people. And since then, it's been full time.
Wow. Well, so you've talked a little bit about, how you got into this. What is it specifically that you share? Now, you mentioned the tracks, and
Yes.
you also mentioned a gift. You mentioned you check into these people a little bit to get their background, and you write a letter. Other than, obviously I'm sharing the gospel at some point. What is it that you share to kind of get the door open to break the ice with this person, and say who you may not really have a connection with, other than who they are, they have no clue who you are.
Right. Right. Which is so funny. There are, the stereotypical people who are like, "I've loved you my whole life." And they're like, "Cool. I have no idea who you are." So everybody, I research them, and I try to research them, not just spiritually, but their personality. What do they enjoy? What are things that would be appealing to them? Because the Bible clearly says, "Be all things to all people." Doesn't mean change the message, but you change the tactic, you change the approach. And as a youth pastor, I see that very, very helpful with kids and different personalities. So the standard gift is a Bible, different tracks, because like right here, I've just got a couple tracks handy: "How to Make Sure You'll Go to Heaven," "Evidence for God from a Scientific Perspective," that kind of thing. A copy of my friend Tony Nolan's book, Gasp, which is one of the best books I've ever read. If anybody listening has never read it, I highly encourage it. It's based out of Matthew 7, where Jesus says, many will say to me that day, Lord, Lord, I did many great works in your name. I prophesied it in your name. I cast out demons in your name. And he will say, depart from me. I never knew you. Never had a relationship with you. And a lot of times you can really tie that message in with celebrities. And I tell people this, think of your favorite celebrity, somebody you've been a fan of your entire life. For me, if somebody said, who's your favorite celebrity? I'd say Paul McCartnney. And they said, okay, well, if Paul McCartney walked into the room, would you know him? I'd recognize him a mile away. I know his walk a mile away. I know what he likes, what he doesn't like, because that's somebody I'm a fan of. And if I went up to him and said, Sir Paul, it's so great to meet you, he'd go, that's great. Who are you? And, it's like, well, yeah, that's what you would expect. There's no reason why he would know who you are, because he and I don't have a relationship. It's just one-sided. And
Right.
sadly, that's what's happened with a lot of people and Jesus. We are fans of Jesus. We know some things about Jesus, what he likes, what he doesn't like, but there's never been a relationship. We've never given our life to Christ. And Tony does a great job of breaking that down in his book. And if the name Tony Nolan sounds familiar, he's the guy who used to preach on Winter Jam. He's got a church outside of Atlanta, Georgia now. Great guy. And like I said, can't recommend that book enough. But then also, just some other things that if you follow the ministry page on social media, you'll see me mention any Lee Strobel book at all. Love Lee Strobel. He's done a great job at breaking down Christianity from a historical and scientific perspective for any skeptic. That's great for a lot of different faith beliefs, from anything from atheist, agnostic, Muslims, who is Jesus, the real Jesus. I mean, it's wonderful material. I also just recently gave out Mere Christianity to Somebody by C.S. Lewis.
Great book.
Oh, wonderful book. My wife got it for me shortly after we started dating. I'd never read it. And it's funny. People will ask me, what are you reading? I have to discipline myself to read. That's just how I am. But once I start reading, I love it. But yeah, Mere Christianity is great. Trying to think of some others. Not a Fan by Kyle Idleman. It kind of goes along those same lines as Matthew 7. And I'm looking over at my bookshelf right now, if you're wondering what. And then, honestly, this is just an example of just specific gifts for specific different personalities. I got to share the gospel with Jim Brewer several times. He's the Goat Boy from Saturday Night Live. Incredibly nice man. And his wife is a born-again Christian. She got saved about, I want to say, 7-8 years ago. So he talks about faith a lot. He talks about what keeps him from being a born-again Christian. And one of his stand-up bits is talking about how he can't stand his wife's music. He's like, I just want to get in the car and listen to AC/DC. I don't want to hear Chris Tomlin. And it's just so funny hearing Chris Tomlin come off the lips of somebody from Saturday Night Live. But he's like, I just told my wife, if you could get some rock and Jesus music, that might get me. So the last time I saw him, I was like, hey, I got you a copy of Skillet's new CD. That's amazing. And John Cooper's book, Awaken Alive, which is an incredibly convicting book. There's few people that stand on the gospel as firm as Skillet as publicly as they do. And he even messaged me on social media a few days later, and he said, I just want to let you know, 1, CD's great. 2, I really appreciate you basically trying to meet me where I am and show me Jesus in a way that I could relate to. So those are just kind of some of the things. And like I said, the letter, it's a handwritten letter, and it's based on their personality, the questions they've asked or things they've said about Jesus, God, religion, etc.
So when you're looking at all these different, artists, and now you said you've gone from, just going after artists that you enjoy
Right.
to a broader scope. How do you go about choosing who it is that you're going to try to meet?
That's a good question. Sometimes it's difficult because I could be somewhere every day. There's always something going on. And up until recently, when I say recently, up until the past couple of years, it was all within a 6-hour radius of here in East Tennessee. And that shocks a lot of people, but you don't realize what a small world it is. Like I can still remember somebody locally posting. They're like, "Oh my goodness, this is Keanu Reeves' doppelganger on a bike." I'm like, that is Keanu Reeves. That's him. Why would he be here? Because he rides his bike in the Smokies. He visits here fairly often. And they're like, there's no way. And I was like, here's a photo of him 6 hours before. It was him. All that to say, so basically what I do to decide who I'm going after, when tours are announced, I try to put in my calendar everybody coming around, no matter who it is. And then, of course, with actors and actresses, it's different because it could be filming a movie, it could be a book signing, different things, public speaking at a college. And I put it all on my calendar. Then as the weeks go on, I just keep an eye on my calendar and I research them. And I pray, all right, guys, show me who it is you want me to go after. And a lot of times it's my old school mentality. I get a piece of paper and on one side I write their names. On the other side, here's what they believe. And I just kind of pray over it and be like, all right, well, let's kind of do process of elimination. And it's really good because here in East Tennessee, for the longest time, nobody would like bring their big tours around here because there was basically what it was is just, they were like, okay, we'll hit these giant cities when it was always frustrating because I'm like, I really don't want to drive 4 hours. But then just in the past year, people have been coming locally, and that's been a huge help and blessing to me and my wife. And there's even been a couple of times that it's opened the door that it wouldn't have been opened besides that, because you're in a smaller area, you're more, sometimes, not always, sometimes more accessible. It's funny, though, the smaller cities, smaller towns you get in, you get more Barney Fife people. Like, we got to protect these people like they're the president. It's like, oh, great.
That's funny.
Oh,
yeah. What has been like maybe the hardest person you've somebody maybe you've tried to get multiple times and you finally arrive there? What's kind of been the hardest one?
Oh man. When you say hardest, you mean like the most difficult to get to, not the most difficult person to talk to, right?
Yes, the most difficult person to access.
Man, I mean, the one that always comes to mind when somebody says that is Jackson Brown, and it really shouldn't have been as difficult as it was. But but I now can look back, and this is a mini sermon in itself. We can look back and see what God was doing when we didn't understand it. Jackson Brown was somebody who, again, when I say I'm not a fan, it's not that I don't enjoy a few songs, but it's not like I'm like, I got to see this person live. I've got to buy their merch. I've got, it's that kind of thing. So Jackson Brown, it was just somebody I was like, okay, well, I was like, who is that? Oh, it's the Running on Empty guy. And at the time I was like, oh, it's the song from Forrest Gump. But I have a friend, he's in his 50s, and anytime I say something like that, he just does this. He's like, I can't stand you. But that's just my generation. That's how we got to know things. But so Jackson Brown did an interview. I forget who the interview was even with now. There's a website called The Guardian, because a lot of people ask, well, I want to find out what my favorite celebrity believes. It's not that hard sometimes. Sometimes you got to watch a bunch of interviews, but a lot of times if you put in like Jackson Brown religion, bunch of stuff comes up. And The Guardian is a website that's really good for asking faith-based questions. And I love it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I know. And I just like a lot of times how they kind of make that transition and get people talking, because I'm so used to writing, you said in The Guardian, in the letter or whatever. But I want to say it was The Guardian with Jackson Brown. But anyway, he was just talking about, he has a friend who's a devout, born-again Christian. And he's like, I don't understand them because they are so narrow-minded, they meaning born-again Christians. They're so narrow-minded because they believe that the one and only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ. Well, what about the Muslims? What about the Hindus? And he's naming all these people. He's like, how could a loving God send anyone to hell? Which I call that the Jehovah's Witness mentality. And I remember just feeling incredibly saddened and burdened for him, because I was like, because he would say, when I say he said a lot, he said a lot. And I was like, man, I really need to get to this guy. And I drove in total about 2,500 miles to end up getting him. And that was all within a 6-hour radius. But it was day after day after day. One day I wouldn't see him. The next day I'd see him and he turned me down. He just waved or whatever. And then the worst one was when I was on my way to witness to somebody else, and then God was just like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You're supposed to be going after Jackson in South Carolina." I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I don't want to." And I turned the car around, and then I still didn't get it. And I'm like, "God, why are you doing this to me?" Looking back now, though, every city I went to that was a failure, I got to know people in those cities who became friends, who later gave me tips to reach other people. And I look back like I would have never met them. I would have never known that if it weren't for those days going after Jackson. But then finally in Asheville, North Carolina, met up with Jackson. And I mean, I about cried tears of joy because I was like, because the way it was set up, I was like, he's going to have to walk right by me. I was about to the point of grabbing his hand, opening it up, putting the gift bag there and saying, "Go." But we can't do that. But I walked up to him and I said, "You have no idea what I've been through to try to give you this." And he said, "Well, I'd love to hear all about it." And so when I told him, I was like, I was here, I was there. And he's like, "Were you the guy hollering at me?" Yes, because this was all within a year. And it showed a level of importance to him, of how important it was that the gospel got in his hand. And he was very kind and receptive. We had a nice conversation. And I've always said if the opportunity came for me to go after him again, I would, because I would love to follow up. But of course, the evil in the back of my mind is like, please just retire from touring, because don't ever put me through that again. And to this day, if I have a friend who's an autograph collector, they know it triggers me. They're like, "Yeah, we waited 30 minutes and got Jackson." I'm like, "Please be quiet." He always comes to mind. There's other cases of just really the most recent one being Harrison Ford. That's somebody and that's a long story. I met Harrison, how many years ago was it? 6 years ago. And it was not the greatest encounter. It was okay. And I was not fully prepared to witness to him. It was a very last minute thing. And he's got family in this area. And I when I find out his plane's coming in, I always go to the private airport. And a lot of times my wife and I will see him on the runway, or because he'll either be dropping off his wife to visit her mother, or he'll be picking up his mother-in-law or dropping her off. But it's one of those things I'm like, we've gone so many times. And then just recently we had an encounter with him. And it couldn't have been better. Couldn't have been more God orchestrated. And so, of course, driving home that night, my wife and I are like, we've gone after him, I think it was 7 or 8 times. I forget. And it was like, it finally paid off, and it was a beautiful encounter. So those are the two that come to mind.
Do you find yourself, now that you do this so often and you work so hard at it, do you find yourself accidentally running into people?
It's only happened a few times. And it's usually Nashville is like the Hollywood of the South. You never know who you're going to see there. I remember, and this is even from just a Christian artist perspective. I was waiting on Sally Field at the airport one time, and there's the guy who was the voice of Max in a Goofy movie. And my wife and I had witnessed him a few months before, and he kept looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, "Come here. Do I know you?" And then we had a nice conversation, and then here comes Jason Gray. You may know who he is. He's a Christian artist. And I stopped him and just said hi. He was very freaked out. Anybody recognized him. But then here came Joel and Luke Smallbone for King Country. And it was all within like 5 minutes. And it was so funny because Joel and Luke, I've met them several times. They call me homeschool kid because as a kid meeting them, I was like, "Hey, I'm homeschooled too." And they were like, "We can tell." And I said, "Why?" Because no normal person comes up and is like, "Hi, I'm a public school person." I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's true." And I'll never forget. They were like, "Oh, and they know about the ministry." They were like, "So who are you after?" I said, "Sally Field." "Oh, Aunt May?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Oh, cool. When is she coming?" I said, "In like 45 minutes. It's not worth it." They left. The best accidental run-in, well, and of course, New York City. I went up there first time since the ministry's been full time, ironically, and it was just. I remember a friend of mine gave me a tip. He's like, "Go to this hotel if you want to see people," because I had nobody planned out to witness to that day. And within 5 minutes, there was Kristen Stewart, there was Rami Malek from Bohemian Rhapsody, Sydney Sweeney, and it was like, wow, that escalated very quickly. But the most God orchestrated accidental run-in was Keanu Reeves, because I was waiting on Ed Asner, and so that tells you this was like 6 years ago as well. Ed was agnostic. I'd missed Ed at the airport, and I thought I'd missed him, but it was that whole thing. I'm a very hard-headed person. I'm like, I will exhaust myself just to be like, I've got to make sure. So I'm sitting there. There was another guy waiting, and he and I both were like, we're wasting our time, but we're both just, it's like, well, we've already wasted our day. What's another couple hours? And so he's at one entrance, I'm at the other, just making sure he doesn't get by us. And down the escalator comes this huge entourage, and there's Keanu. And I was like, there's no way I'm looking at Neo from The Matrix right now, because it's not Greenville, South Carolina is not a hot spot for people. And at that time, I didn't know he rode his motorcycle around here a lot. That's why I mentioned that earlier. And then we kind of walked behind him, because he came over. He's like, "Was that John Wick?" I was like, "I think it was." And I'm Googling as I'm walking towards him. I'm like, Keanu Reeves religion. He's agnostic as well. So I had all the right material, but not the letter. So I just took out Ed Asner's letter, and then we had a nice conversation. Keanu is just as kind as people say he is. He was very like, how in the world did you know I was going to be here? I was like, I didn't. And he's like, come on, you knew. You have me a gift. I said, can I just be real with you? I would have a full-size Matrix poster for you to sign. He's like, that's a fair point. But, he was very, very nice. So those are the most accidental run-ins. But I will say I'm always that person like this, because you never know. And even I met Jeremy Renner in Arizona earlier this year, and we were talking, and I mentioned where I was from. He said, I know exactly where you are. He said, when we were filming The Avengers in Atlanta, I would get on my motorcycle, drive up to Gatlinburg, all around those back roads. And he said, and I know, he said, do you know where Amy Mills is? That's 1 mile from my house. And he's like, yeah, it's like 100% spring run well, and he's just talking all about the history of Tennessee. He's like, oh yeah, I loved on the weekends when we had time off to just ride my motorcycle up there. So it's a small world.
Awesome. Well, you've had quite the adventure.
Yeah.
So who is someone that you really have wanted to meet, but maybe hasn't, either you haven't tried yet, or you haven't had the opportunity? Who's somebody who you really have a heart to connect with? So
I will say, it's so funny. Anytime my mind goes blank whenever I'm asked that question. There are a few people that come to mind. Dick Van Dyke is somebody I always wanted to talk to. Sadly, I almost feel like that ship sailed. Not speaking morbidly, he doesn't travel that much anymore.
Right.
He used to travel when I was not fully connected in, I don't want to say the industry, but it's like knowing, okay, this person's going to pop up and do a book signing and this and this. I was unaware. I didn't have those connections yet, sadly. Trying to think of a couple other people. Dua Lipa is somebody I'd really like to talk to, and here's why. She was on Stephen Colbert about a month ago, I would say. And I always appreciate Stephen Colbert. He just seems like a very nice person, and he's not overly crude, and he asks genuinely good questions. And so Dua Lipa's on there. She's talking about her new podcast that she's starting. And she's like, it's so weird being on the other side of the table. And then Stephen goes, let's do it right now. Come on, I'll give you a practice round. And she's like, okay. And he's like, come on, you can't think of a question. You got to be on your toes. He's picking on her. And then she says, give me a minute. And she pauses for probably 30 seconds. And it's just so interesting. This was on mainstream TV. And you can look up the interview. But she goes, I've got it. One thing your viewers love about you is how candid and open you are about your faith in the Catholic Church. And he's like, okay. You could tell Stephen's like, whoa, I did not expect it to go this way. And I'm a firm believer. Some things are scripted. I was like, there's no way that was scripted. And she said, I would love to hear more about your faith, because faith really intrigues me. And that's something that I want to talk more about. And I was like, okay, well, you're at the top of my hit list that I want to go after. Because, and that's the thing, when I find somebody who's like, I'm looking and I'm searching, those are definitely the most prominent people to try to reach. And sadly, I'll just say this, there's sometimes I believe people get caught up in the snare of sin and of the world, and that's why you have to act quickly. It's like, I remember, for example, a few years ago, Nikki Sixx from Motley Crue was posting all over social media, do you believe in God? Why or why not? I'm reading all the questions and comments. I'm searching for God. And I wrote a big thing on his page, and he liked it because he was like, I'm going to read them all and go through them. And I was like, I really want to do whatever it takes to reach him face to face. And then COVID happened because they were going out on tour. A friend of mine, for a wedding present, bought me a meet and greet. So he was like, here, go to the show with them and Def Leppard. You get to witness to Nikki that you've always wanted to. And then it got postponed and postponed and postponed. And finally, the way the meet and greet was set up, it was very unconventional to what I was trying to do. Like, it was like, all right, stand 10 feet away from them, no contact. I mean, I was like, this isn't even a meet and greet. It was really, and I basically dug my feet in the sand because I waited to be last in line. And so legally, when you do a meet and greet like that, a caliber like that, you have to receive, they have to take a photo of you with them, because otherwise you can report it to your credit card company. Hey, this was fraud. I didn't get to meet them, etc.
Yeah.
So I just get my back to the camera the whole time trying to talk to Nikki, because they're like, all right, turn around. Because it was like, all right, walk up, get out of here.
Yeah.
And
as soon as the photo's taken, you're done.
Right. And I just said, Nikki, you are the main reason I bought this meet and greet. And I had gifts from all, but he was like, I said, you are the main person I wanted to reach and talk to. You said this, this, and this. And he listened, and he was, oh, thank you very much, man. And then, again, this is one of those cases. I think it may have been more, that divine appointment may have been more for Mick Mars, because I ended up getting connected on social media with Mick Mars' son and his daughter-in-law, who I did not realize. I preached at a church in Kentucky at a missions conference, and I met them. No idea that was Mick Mars' son and daughter-in-law. And then they connected with me on social media, and he was like, you know how I asked you if you'd ever witnessed the Motley Crue? Yeah, this is why. And he starts sending me photos of him and his dad, and I'm like, well, could you have helped a brother out? That's terrible. That's terrible. But he was like, please keep praying for my dad. He's like, I know he kept your gift. And I saw a photo of Mick walking backstage that night with his gift bag. So, but yeah, anytime somebody's, like that, and I encourage anybody listening, if it's like, hey, here's somebody who's clearly stated questions or anything, send it my way. Just so it doesn't slip through the cracks, because I can't watch every interview. And I love when people send, hey, here's this person, pray about reaching out after them.
Dylan and I talked for so long, I decided to go ahead and split this up into 2 episodes. So make sure you check back next week for the second part of our interview with Dylan. If you would like to follow or support his work, check out the links down in the show notes below. Well, that's all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, just click all those links, whatever the links are down there. That way you will get informed anytime we put out new content. You can find all of our social links and links to our YouTube channel and our online store at ChristianNerdsUnite.com. If you enjoy the show and want to help even more, consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. All of our Patreon levels have great benefits and make a huge difference in the ministry we are able to do here. Supporters will also get to hear exclusive stories of believers we are serving around the world through our ministry partners. To check it out or to partner with us, go to patreon.com/ChristianNerdsUnite or ChristianNerdsUnite.com and click support in the menu. And don't forget to check out ChristianNerdHQ.com for more great podcasts. Before you go, I do want to leave you with this blessing. Lord Jesus Christ, send us out with confidence in your word, to tell the world of your saving acts and bring glory to your name. Amen. We'll see you next week. Blessings.